We'll be starting in 1 minute at 6:10.
All right, so we'll be starting now. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the first session for web development. We are very delighted to have you here. In this session, we'll be covering the basics of HTML and CSS for front-end web development. In today's session, we'll be having a live demonstration of replicating a design mockup using HTML CSS. This will be followed by assignments in the form of tasks and exercises for you to attempt before the next session. We will be also covering queries regarding prerequisites and e-Lite as a whole. This is an overview of the entire induction process. We will be holding sessions every week, which will be followed by assignments for the participants to attempt. All the tasks are compulsory. Those who qualify at the end of this process will be granted the ad hoc status at exam. Now, handing it over to Mehul for the live demonstration.
So good evening, students. Today we will be creating some code to replicate the design for this mockup on my screen. This is a pretty simple website and it can be completed in somewhere between 45 to 60 minutes. The flow of our coding process will be very simple. Firstly, we will try to analyze and break down the website into simpler components. After that, we'll be writing some markup code or basically HTML to establish the structure of our content, after which we'll be writing some CSS to actually style the components. We will code the entire website on codesandbox.io over here. So without any delay, let's start with the session. So basically, first I will generate some boilerplate for my HTML. Over to the CSS, we have basically imported a font called Manrope from the Google Fonts. And basically this shows that I've reset my configuration like margin 0 and padding 0 so that I can customize all my components according to my needs. So let's move over to the design. So as I can see, this is my header section and it has basically three components: the nav bar and the container containing the text or the content and an image. So I'll move here. So I have my header section containing a nav bar, and that nav bar should have a logo. Inside that logo, we have an image, and I've already imported that image in my assets folder. We have logo.png. And we have also the menu items. So we have product, we have services, about, and also a login button. So I think this is enough for the structure of our content. If we move over to the design.
Before you move on, Mehul, I just like to add one thing for all the participants, that this session might feel a little bit like a rush to you. We just recommend that we will be sending the recording of the session. If you just go over it once or twice, you'll start understanding more about it and you'll get more comfortable with it. Yeah, continue.
So we can see that we have a logo image over here and 4 menu items. So we're done with the structure of the content. Let's move to the style. So basically I can say I have a header and the height should be 100%. The background color is okay. So moving on to the nav bar, we have display flex. I will explain each and every part of this code so you don't have to worry at all. And inside the nav, we have some menu items. And lastly, we have okay. Just taking some time to reload. Okay, so as you can see, I've written the CSS for this structure, but it is not actually working because of the reason because we have not connected our HTML document to the style sheet. So I have to say rel style sheet, and we have to connect it using dot style dot. And now if we reload the page, you can actually see that we are able to view the nav bar for the design. Just have to add another class over here with the so basically if I view it in full mode. So we are done with the nav bar of the design that we're trying to replicate. We have to make some tweaks over here because the alignment is not proper and we'll do it soon. So now let's move on to the container. So as we can see, this is the nav bar and now we can move on to the container. So we can say we have a container. Inside the container, we have some content and we have an image. So inside the content, we have a heading. And after that, we have a paragraph. So if we have to see here, we have a heading, we have a paragraph, and we have two buttons. So I will create two buttons over here. Another one. So I will enter some dummy text here. Inside. And also some buy template and explore. We can say buy template and explore. So let's start with the styling of the structure we have made. Okay. So as soon as I'll be done with the header section, I will explain each and every part of this code. So we can say header, and inside that header, we have a container which has a property of flex. We have header. Inside that we have a container, and inside there we have content. The width of the content should be 50%. Font weight 400. Then we have a color. All we are left with is styling the buttons. So I can say that we have a green button over here, so we can name it like BTN green, and this one we can name it as BTN transparent. So you can have a class BTN green, and we can have a class over here as BTN transparent. So we have BTN green, set the border to none. And we're left with the last button now. We have dot transparent. We can basically say all of this is also true for BTN transparent, except that we have to set the border to 2 pixel and white. Okay, so let's view the result. Okay, so we have a problem over here. We have to set this to transparent. So over here, you can see that we have made the header section of the website. So we have a nav bar over here. We have some heading. We have some text over here and 2 buttons and a header image over here. So let's move to the CSS and let me explain it to you. So basically we have a header over here, which is set to 100% height. So basically it will have all the elements within it and basically encapsulate all the elements within it and will be set to the 100% height. It has some background color with the specified hex code. And moving on to the nav bar, we have the display property of the nav bar is set to flex. So basically they will be all in one line, and the justify content is space between. So they will have spaces and they will position to the end and align item center. So basically on the horizontal axis, they are set to the center. And padding basically means the amount of space they have between the outer area of the element and the content. So basically if you're saying 40 pixels, so we are saying that there's a space of 40 pixels from here, and 5% means basically a 5% from the right and the left of the elements. So we have a display flex, justify content center, list style none basically says that we should not have those markers. So basically we're removing those markers and setting it to none. Then we have a color which is set to white. Margin inline basically says we have to set margin 20 pixels from the right and the left. And here we have a background color of white, a color of black, And same padding 10 pixel, 40 pixel means 10 pixel from the top and bottom, 40 pixel from the right and left, and a border radius is set to 24 pixels. So now we come to the container, and basically this type of convention says that we have a 30 pixel padding from the top, 5% from the right and the left, and 100 pixels from the bottom. We also have width 50%, color, font size 48 pixels. So let us just fix what is wrong. So we have this, we have to fix this. So in case of BTN transparent, we have to set it to color white. And also here we have so basically we have to say align items center. Okay. So now they are all in one line because on the horizontal axis, they should be center. So now let's move on to the second section of the website, which is our services section. And then we'll move on to the footer section. So basically, if I try to analyze, we can see that the services section also has three components, which is the headings, the container, which has the three components if you can see. So basically the heading, the container, and the container has three components which we can call as cards. So basically there's one card, the second, and the third one. So let's try to structure it using HTML. So we move on to our HTML file. So we can say we have a section named services, and inside that we have our services. We also have another text which we can use as dummy text. And then we have basically a container which we will talk about later. So let's have a look at this. So we will first be styling the headings of this section. So let's move on to the CSS. So I can say we have a section with the class services, which should have a background color of hex code FFF, which is basically white, and then a padding of 60 pixel from all four sides. So basically top, bottom, left, and right. Just copy this. So inside the services section, we have a small heading with H6, and it should be aligned to the center. The color should be gray. The font weight of this should be 400, and the font size can be something like 20 pixels. Moving on to the main heading of the section, which is H1, we can have it aligned to be center. The color should be black. The font weight should again be 400. Since it is larger in size, so we can have the font size to be anything between 48 pixels and 50 pixels. And then we can have the margin top to be set to 20 pixels. And the last thing left over here is the container. So container should have the display property of flex and the justify content space evenly, and the margin top should be 50 pixels. So let's view it in the browser. So as you can see, we have set the larger heading to be black in color and this one to be gray as shown in the design. We also have that it should break after this. So something after this word. So I can just put a break tag over there. So yeah, it's pretty decent now. Yes. So now moving on to the container and the cards inside the container. So I will again first write the markup for it. So basically I can say we have a card, and the card should have an image. Below that image, we should have a title and some content, and then a link to explore that particular card. So basically we can say explore page, and I can use a right arrow. This is the entity code for right arrow. So if I analyze this card, we have an image, and below that image we have a title, and below that title we have some content, obviously corresponding to that particular card, and then we have the explore page link. So yes, so I can just copy it 3 times. I will just insert the images. And over here 3. Okay, so inside the title we can say cool title number 1. We can just copy in both the other cards, cool title 2 and cool title 3. And inside we can have some dummy text such as okay, so we'll just put a hashtag over here to show that it is a link. So we are pretty much done with the structure, and let me just view it in my browser. So we're pretty much done with the structure. All we have to do is style the component, that is these cards. So let's move on to the CSS part. So I can say basically we have a section named services, and inside that we have a container, and inside that container we have a card. So that card should have, again, I will first write the CSS and then explain each and every line of it. So we have a margin of 20 pixels and a width of 300 pixels should be fine. So inside that card, as you remember the structure, we have a heading, and the font weight should be set to 400. Font size should be somewhere around 24 pixels. And then we can have a margin block. Margin block basically is a shorthand property for giving that element a margin from the top and the bottom. As you can see above, we had a margin inline, which basically gives margin to the right and the left, whereas margin block gives margin to that element from the top and the bottom. So now we can move on to the paragraph that we had. So basically the color should be grayish white and a font size of, since it is smaller, so we can have 14 pixels. And then we can again have a margin block, which basically means margin from both top and bottom. And then we can have a line height of 25 pixels. And the last step over here is to style the link as well. So we can say that the link should be display inline block.
Mehul, sorry to interrupt, but for everyone who's asking questions in the Q&A, we'll answer the questions after the session. If you have anything related to a specific topic which is going on, I'll type in the answer, or I'll tell Mehul to answer the question.
Okay. So basically we are giving the link to the card a display property of inline block, and I will explain what is the difference between inline block, flex block, etc. Then we have a text align of left and a color of black, obviously. The text decoration should be set to none, and the padding should be 10 pixels, 10 pixels, 10 pixels, and 0. And the border from the bottom should be 2 pixels solid and black. So we're pretty much done with the CSS, and let's view it in the browser. So as you can see, we have an image as the header image basically of that card. Then we have a title for each card, and the corresponding text, which in our case is a dummy text. And then we have the link. So if we compare it to the demo, or basically the design mockup that we have, it is kind of similar to it. Yes, over here. So you can see the header section and then our services section. So we shall now move on to the footer section. So I will again first write the Okay, so basically I shall explain the CSS for the services section. So basically I said that I have a section whose background color should be white and the padding from all sides, from the top, bottom, left and right, should be 60 pixels. So if you see here, we have a padding, basically the distance from the actual container, the distance from the of the text from the actual container, 60 pixels. And so we have section services, which is the services section, and the heading should be aligned to the center and should have a color gray, font weight 400 and font size 20 pixels. So if you can see, this is the H4, H6 heading with gray color, and then font weight 400, font size 20 pixels, etc. Then we have the main heading, which is also aligned to the center with the color black and a bigger font size, which is 48 pixels. And if you can see here, this is the main heading. Moving on to the cards, basically the cards inside the container. So container has been set to a display of flex and justify content space evenly. And it also has a margin top 50 pixels. So basically it is 50 pixels from the top of from the bottom of the heading. So basically it is 50, the distance between the heading and the container is 50 pixels. So moving back to the code, we have set the width of the card to 300 pixels, and again the margin should be 20 pixels. So basically the card should be separated by each other by 20 pixels. And then we have the heading of the card with the font size and the margin, and again with the paragraph we have set it to gray and font size 14 pixels, etc. And lastly with the anchor, basically the anchor link, so we have over here, we have set the border bottom to 2 pixels, and then text decoration none basically says that we should not have an underline below the links, if you have closely noticed on some websites. And then we have set the color to black and also the text aligned to left. So that's pretty much it. And now moving on to the footer section. So basically inside the footer section, I can see two components. There can be more, but what I can see that we have an about us, or basically about the company section, and then we have the about links. So basically home, products, and etc. So if I try to write the HTML for this footer section, I can have footer tag, and then basically I can write about company. Inside the company, we can have the company name, and then some dummy text, let's say 20. And then we also have all rights reserved. Yeah, so that's it with the about company. And inside the footer menu, basically, or the links, so we can just leave it as footer menu at the moment. So let's just style the about company first. So we have a footer, and it should again be a display of flex. The justify content should be set to space around. The background color should be same as the one we used in the header. And the padding from all the sides should be 80 pixels. So basically the about company element. So basically this much about element of the company inside the footer, the width should be 400 pixels. Inside the about company, we have a heading, basically the name of the company, which is Boldo. We can say text transform uppercase, which basically, even if I change this to normal BOLDO, so it will just transform it to the uppercase. And then we can have the font size set to 42 pixels, and the color should again be white. So moving on to the small paragraph written for the company. The color should again be gray, but we can have it on the light side. And then we have font size. Since it is a paragraph, so we can say font size of, let's say 15 pixels. and then a line height of 28 pixels, and margin from the top should be 30 pixels. And the last one was that all rights reserved line, which is basically inside a small tag. So I can just directly write small, and we can say the display should be block, margin top should be 40 pixels. So we're done with the about company section inside the footer. So let me just reload my browser. Okay, so this is the about company. So we have a heading, we have a paragraph, and also the small tag containing all rights reserved line. And now we have to bring here the menu items, or basically the footer menu in our case. So let's move on to the HTML, and now I'll write the structure for it. So inside the footer menu, I can say there should be a box which should have a heading, and inside the heading we should have the corresponding menu links. So home, product, services. So even if you see here, we have a box. I can consider this as a single box, and inside that box we have a heading and the links corresponding to that heading. So basically home, product, services, and then home, career, services, etc. So I'll just replicate this since we have 3 boxes, and we can say company, then again home, career, services, and the third one is resources, blog, products. So I'll just write them out. Resources, blog, and then product, services. So if I view it in my browser, I think we are pretty much done with the structure. Yes. And now we have to move on to the styling part. Yes, we're done with the structure. Moving on to the styling part, we have footer, and inside that we have footer menu. The footer menu should once again be set to display flex and justify content center. And then inside the footer menu, we have a div which I was calling a box, basically this one. So I can say we have inside the footer menu, we have a div, and then we can have the margin set to be 30 pixels and 40 pixels. And then inside the div, we have a heading. Set to 10 pixels. Font size should be somewhere, since it is a small heading, should be somewhere around 20 pixels. And then the last is the corresponding links. Margin top 30 pixel, and the color should be okay. So let's view it in our browser. So as you can see, we have perfectly aligned the menu links and all. So let's move to the CSS part. So basically I have a footer over here, and the display property is set to flex, and justify content is set to space around. And then we have a background color same as the one we used in header. The color, basically the color of the text should be white, in our case FFF, which is the hex code for white. And then we have a padding of 80 pixel, which means from all sides it should have a space of 80 pixel. The content should have a space of 80 pixel. Then moving on to the first component of the footer, which is the about company, we have set the width to 400 pixels. So basically the width of this much should be 400 pixels. And then we have a heading inside the about company, and it should be uppercase. Basically, even if you write in lowercase over here, it will transform it to uppercase over here. So basically we have transformed it to uppercase. We have a font size of 42 pixels since it is a big heading. And then we are also the color set to white. And then we have a paragraph, which should have the color of this hex code, which is somewhat gray. Then we have font size set to 15 pixels, and then line height is 28 pixels. And margin top, basically the space between the heading. Basically this content should have a space from the top. So the space from the top should be set to 30 pixels. So if I increase it over here, you can see that it has 50 pixels of space between the heading and the paragraph. So now moving on to the last component of the about company, we have margin top 40 pixel and display of block, as you can see. And then now moving on to the second major component of the footer menu, which is basically the footer menu having the links. So I have again set the footer menu to display of flex and justify content center. So if you can see here, they're sent on the horizontal axis, they are at the center. So they're evenly spaced and are at the center. And then inside the footer menu, we have a div, which I was calling a box, basically this box. So this box should have a margin of 30 pixels and 40 pixels. So 30 pixels and 40 pixels. If you're giving two parameters to the margin property, that basically means we're giving 30 pixels from the top and bottom and 40 pixels from the right and the left, since it moves in a clockwise direction. So we are having a margin of 30 pixels and 40 pixels. So basically 30 pixels from the top and 30 from the bottom, whereas 40 from the right and 40 from the left. And then we move on to the heading of the box or the div. So margin bottom should be 10 pixels. The distance between the first link and the heading should be 10 pixels, or the bottom space should be 10 pixels. And then font size should be 20 pixels, since it is a small to medium sized heading. And then the last thing that we have inside the box is the actual link over here. So home, product, services, which should have a spacing of 30 pixels from the top. So basically a 30 pixels from the top. And then we have a color set to this hex code, which is somewhat gray. So if we view it in the browser, we can compare the design that we try to replicate and the actual website that we've made. And it is pretty much similar to it, and we are completed within 45 to 50 minutes. So yeah, we are done with the replication of the website. And if there are any questions, you may ask in the chat box.
Mehul, I think there are a lot of questions in the Q&A to go there.
Okay, so we have a question by Jayesh Agarwal. So have you created one class only as the name of section services, or many classes with the name like section services? So in our case, I have only used one class named services. So there was no conflict between other elements. Had I used two elements with the same class, then I should have specified exactly that which element is using which class. So there's basically no conflict. So I would have to write services, and then if I'm using it on the button, then I should have written services hyphen btn or something like that. So basically there's no conflict between two elements. What does div stand? Div is basically an HTML element, and if you have to create anything like a box or a container, so you can write div for it. So div basically stands for division. So writing different divisions. So we have, like, if you have three boxes, you won't write P for it or A for it, which stands for paragraphs and anchor links. You would write div for it, so other developers can also understand what you're trying to do there. Could you please explain how the offline induct? I think Kavin, you can answer that. So have you created one class? Okay.
What was the question?
Could you explain how the offline induction would take place?
Okay, so this is the format which we have this year. We will have 4 sessions, which will be online sessions during the vacations, right? So after each session, you'll be given a task, which is a compulsory task. Failure to do the task will lead to elimination, right? So after every session, you will be given tasks, and after the summer vacations, the first week during the summer vacations, you'll be given one project kind of a task where you'll have to create a website based on the skills which you've learned over this period, or some knowledge which you might have had before joining the sessions. So based on the task and the final prompt, we'll be judging you. For web development, there will be nothing which will be conducted offline. We might have an interview in the end. If it is offline, we will be telling you a week before. But other than that, there will be nothing which will be offline. Everything will be taking place online, and mostly it will be during the summer vacations. I hope that answers the question, Siddhartha.
Yes.
Mehul.
Yes. How did you change the link from?
Sanav, okay, so sorry to interrupt, Mehul, but we will be sending a recording of the session in a day or two in the Google Classroom. So if you have any doubts, you can access that. And also, if you have any queries, feel free to ask us. You can put in comments in the classroom, or you might have our emails. If not, I'll put mine, Mehul's and Gav's email, and you can email us with any query if you want. The task will be posted by today evening or max to max by tomorrow, and the due date will be Friday, which is 1 second. I don't remember the date, but uh, which is Friday the 10th, right? So the due date will be Friday. So we'll be posting the task by today evening, by tonight. We'll be sending the recording. I said this before as well. Uh, what questions will be asked in the interview? Shesh, the interview is conditional based on if we have any questions regarding your submission, and the questions might be related to what your contribution might be in the club or technical, but we'll look at that later. That's a later stage to come. At the moment, you can look at the task. Shesh, you can use Replit instead of Code Sandbox. That is fine. Navyasha, so what the first two tasks, you can do it in Code Sandbox, which is something called an web IDE. An IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. It's kind of a an editor which provides you with the certain specificities which is needed to start with stuff, right? So Code Sandbox is good for that if you want to start with the web. If you have experience before, you might be using editors like VS Code, Sublime Text, or even Notepad. If you do that, you'll have to share us a Google Drive folder with your submission, or you can share a GitHub repository if you know what that is. We'll be covering what GitHub is after during the third session, because the third and fourth session we'll be requiring you to submit through GitHub. Till that time, you can use an editor, any editor, and based on that, you can submit whatever you're submitting. Which editor would you suggest? If you're a beginner, I'd suggest you start with Code Sandbox. If you have some experience, I'd suggest you move to something like VS Code, because the kind of the what's it called, the plugins or the extensions which it has it's a very community driven one, and it has a lot of extensions which is good to start with, for a moderate level developer. For editors, you can use Code Sandbox. Once again, I'll put in the link in the chat box. So this is a very, very good place to start with, and it also helps in sharing your code with others. So it also has a feature called live editing, live collaborating or something like that. You can collaborate with others. So if you have any doubts, we can collaborate with you in real time, and we can solve that doubt for you there itself. So Code Sandbox is good for that. It is very, very similar to VS Code, but it's in the web. So that's the difference. Um, if you get eliminated, will you be no, Hiram, you'll be allowed to see all the sessions because of the fact that the point of these sessions is to start off people to web development. So you can go through all the sessions, and yeah, yeah, the elimination is purely based on if you submit the task or not, and a decent level of your submission. Midansh, for the first task, actually, Gar, do we have the task ready?
Yeah, we'll be.
Can you share the doc?
I
Can you screen share the document, which was regarding the task?
Yeah, I'll share the mockups. Just give me a minute.
Yeah, so Medhansh, for the first task, what we have is a like what Mehul did during the session, you'll be given mockups, Figma mockups, and based on that, you need to convert it to code. Like, so for here, for example, these are three mockups which you will be given. These are the three mockups which you will be given. You can choose any two of them and convert it to code. And we need an HTML, CSS website on them. Uh, the There's also one additional thing. If you have any prior experience, you can add some functionality to it. For example, search functionality. If you know JavaScript and all that stuff, you can do that. Will we have to sign in to use Figma? You will. I'd suggest you use your institutional email ID since you have some benefits regarding it. You can go and read about it. It's called the, I think, the education pack for Figma. Our web and app development same except for the fact that one is a website and the other is an app. They are very similar to the extent where they work on the same technicalities. For example, if you have a website, you have a boilerplate, you have a UI called the user interface. So what you're seeing is the UI, right? So that's there. It also is there in the app development, and even when you're interacting with a website and app, works a similar way. The only difference I can tell you is maybe the language which you're using to work on website and apps. So we'll be covering something called JavaScript here and something called React. JavaScript will be covered in the second session, and React in the I think the fourth session. Okay, so that is a way, that is a language which can also be used in app development. So yeah, did you? I think maybe this one is for you.
So I'll first answer to the question above. So it is a question asked by Divit Vora. So he said, how did you change the links from being vertical in footer to horizontal? So in order to do that, basically I have those links in a vertical stack. And in order to change them into a horizontal view, I use the display property of flex. So flex basically aligns everything in the vertical stack to a horizontal manner. And that is how I change the links from being vertical in the footer to horizontal. And also I use this in basically the cards. So basically cards would have been aligned in a vertical manner, but since I use the display property of flex, so they were in a horizontal stack, if you would notice. So yes, and another, what is display flex? So yeah, I think I've answered that question. How to change text from vertical to horizontal? I think I've also answered that question. Did you add a link to which the explore option will lead to, or is it just normal text? If I want to, I can write any links. So basically I can write www.google.com in that explore button and it will lead me to that website. And I can also have it as a normal text without any link connected. So it depends on me. Where did we find Boldo template on Code Sandbox? I couldn't join. Boldo template was a design mockup that we had created on Figma, and I was basically replicating it on my Code Sandbox. So you couldn't join it at the right time because obviously I'm doing it in my Code Sandbox. So if I don't give you the link, you cannot join it. So Boldo template was basically a design and we were replicating that design. So question by Govind. So in the code you wrote, was there any link connected to it? I had put a demo link. Basically, I put a hashtag over there so that it does not lead me to any website or anywhere else. But if I want, I can change it to any link or anything. So basically, I can be redirected to that website. In the first round, yes, you will be given the Figma mockups at Garv had shown you. So you'll be given 3 Figma mockups and you will have to choose 2 out of them and replicate it using HTML and CSS. If you have any more questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Will it be too difficult for the beginners? It won't be too difficult for the beginners. So basically, those are just simple mockups with some properties that you would have to use, like again, display flex, which is a very important property in the world of CSS. And you would have to use your knowledge about the CSS, and you can view different tutorials, and we will also give you a doc. So basically help you in the flow of making those websites. So it won't be too difficult for beginners. We have set the task in the manner that you would be able to do it pretty well. Will we have to copy or download the images from Figma? Yes, you have an option over there to export the images, so you won't face an issue there. Okay, do we have to make an exact? Yes, by an exact copy, we mean that you have to replicate the website, and you have to replicate as much close to the mockup we have given to you. So you have to replicate it using HTML and CSS, and that totally depends on you. And if you have an exact copy, then yes, that would be perfect.
Yeah, so Vihan will be releasing the task docs by tonight. So he will receive the mockups and other stuff we have to do by then.
We'll share the code written by you as in reference. I cannot run. Can you please repeat?
Yeah, so for this, we'll be sharing the recording of the entire session. So you can go through the code from that one.
So should I learn HTML and CSS at the same time? HTML and CSS, I believe they go hand in hand. So basically you won't face an issue over there by learning HTML first and then CSS. So even if you learn them at the same time, it won't be an issue.
Mehul, can you check the Q&A?
Just a second. Okay. How will we align the login button? Okay, so if I'm first answering the Q&A and then I'll move back to the chat. How will we align the login button? So basically, wait, where's the question? Okay, so basically what happened was the login button was not in the alignment of the links. So I knew there was some problem with the horizontal axis of the links and the button. So that is why I used the align items property. So basically when you're using a display property of flex, so you have two things over there, which is the justify content, which aligns the things or the elements inside of it in a vertical manner. And then we have align items, which aligns the item basically in a horizontal manner. So I knew that there was some difficulty with the horizontal axis. So I just set the horizontal axis to center. So basically everything is centered. So that is why my login button got fixed and it got centered with along with the basically menu links. Code sandbox isn't working. So you have to log into the code sandbox, and then you can create, basically you will have different options like React and everything, but you have to choose normal HTML and CSS template, and then you can start working and you can write your code there and see the deployment right beside the code editor. Okay, what is display flex? I think I answered that. So have you created one? Yes, I've also answered this. Did you add a link to which explore option will, again, I can add a link to the explore option, but it totally depends on me. So I've just written a hashtag over there just to avoid anything. So it is up to me. I can also write again www.google.com and it will lead me to that website. What does div mean? Again, div basically is a short form for division, and div is basically used for anything which has a container or boxes, or basically you cannot use, if you're making a box, you won't use something like span small or a paragraph, or so basically div is used for those purposes, and other developers can also understand. So basically you're creating a card with the tag div, so that will be it will increase the readability of the code. How to download Figma for web design, including, we will be giving you the link for the Figma mockups, and then you can directly view it in your browser. Can you send the website link on which you made this demo? We do have a recording, so you can view the entire, basically the coding process, and also how we viewed it, and then fix some things and here and there. And also if you want the website link, I think we can share that.
We can share the we'll be sharing the code sandbox link regarding it later. I'll just take over, Mehul, because there are some general questions. Okay, so do we have to use the HTML for the mockup? I think this was, yeah, this was an answer. So you'll be using HTML and CSS like we did during the session, because the HTML is mainly for the structure of the website. You can't do much about it. Much about the design aspect of it. When do we have to finish the task by? We'll be giving you till Friday or Saturday. Uh, yeah, so till then, and you will have to submit the task by then. If you have any issues, feel free to tell us so that we can offer you an extension if we feel needed. Are the resources on Exen site enough to understand web dev? Vedant, it's a very, very structured and a very methodical resource, because it has a lot of stuff and it covers you from the beginning till the very end. So it's important that you go step by step. If you do that, it is very, very much very, very good resource, because it's been compiled over the years by alumni. So yeah, so it is a very good resource if you go step by step. Is JavaScript enough to understand web development? Amaya, so I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. So um, HTML and CSS obviously are the starting points of web development. You cannot do anything without them. It's almost used in every website. Um, JavaScript is a programming language. It is used to add interactivity to a website. So, JavaScript, so I think you're asking in a way that if it can be used in both front end and back end, yes, it can. You can use JavaScript in the front end, you can use JavaScript in the back end in the form of Node.js. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
And also
After
the fact
replicating
that
the mock,
and also the fact that
yeah.
a language, if you're saying that you want to learn web development, that does not only specifically rely on a language. Web development is a broad field, and in order to learn that, you can't just learn a language and understand web development. So yeah, basically learning a language is obviously enough to learn the concepts and how to create website, but understanding web development as a whole is a broader process.
Yeah, it obviously takes time, because you go over certain things. It's not something which you learn over a period of time, in a certain period of time. It's something you go through. It's a process, so you keep doing stuff and you keep learning as you go. After replicating the mockup, how do we share the code file with you? So that's what I said. So there are a few ways to do it. If you use Code Sandbox, feel free to share the Code Sandbox link. I think there's a button on the top right which says share, and you can share that link with us. That's one. Uh, if you have some experience, you might be using your own editor like VS Code. In that case, you can either share a Google Drive link with us, or you can upload it on GitHub if you know how to use GitHub. So either of these works. Um, I will not suggest Google Drive, because it takes a lot of time for us to set up that, because we have to download it and then run it on our devices. So it might be a little tiring for us, and we might miss certain stuff in a website. So if you're a beginner, I'll certainly recommend you to use Code Sandbox, because it already gets us all set up, and we can just go through your website more easily. Let me just, I think all the Q&A were also answered. Yeah. If you have any more questions, you can ask, or else I think the session is over, unless Mehul, you want to add something. Yeah, so you may start leaving. We'll be uploading the task by 8 or 9.